I thought I was watching my parents' wedding, but what I was really watching was a crime in slow motion. I never imagined I'd say that out loud. But one rainy night in Seattle, sitting alone in a house so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, I saw her. 3 decades. 3 different videos. 3 moments that should have had nothing to do with each other. And yet, in each of those moments, there she was. Always in the same position, always behind my father, her eyes locked on him like a shadow that refused to leave. 1995, my parents' wedding in Portland. The room was full of laughter and champagne toasts. And there she stood, in a deep blue dress, not smiling, not clapping, just watching. 2001, my father's birthday party in Chicago. Warm golden lighting, guests talking over soft music. And there she was again, her brown hair in loose curls, her gaze never drifting from my father. 2015, my college graduation in Seattle. The crowd was buzzing with applause and camera flashes. She was seated in the back, wearing a black tailored suit, speaking to no one. No one in my family knew who she was. No one remembered ever meeting her. But when I froze the frames, zoomed in, and placed those images side by side, there was no mistake. Same eyes. Same stillness. Same unsettling presence. And in that moment, I knew, if I didn't find out who she was, I'd never understand the truth about my family. The question was clear. Who is she, and why has she been following my father for 30 years? What I didn't know was that searching for her would drag me straight into a storm of missing persons, financial crimes, and a case that had never been made public. After my mother's funeral, the house felt hollow. Seattle's rain has a way of making silence heavier, and that week it didn't let up once. I spent my days sorting through her things, sweaters that still carried her perfume, stacks of old letters, photo albums that made the years collapse in on themselves. That's when I found it. A cardboard box pushed to the back of her closet, labeled in her handwriting, "Family Videos, Keep Safe." Inside were neatly stacked DVDs and a few VHS tapes with dates scrawled in marker, 1995, 2001, 2015. I remember sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, rain hammering the windows, as I slid the first DVD into the player. The flicker of old footage filled the room, and for a moment, I felt warm. There was my father, Michael Walker, younger, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years. There was my mother, radiant, her hand looped through his arm. Relatives I barely remembered were hugging, clinking glasses, telling bad jokes. For the first few minutes, I just let myself drift into it, the comfort of seeing them together, of remembering that before everything became complicated, we'd been happy. But the comfort didn't last. Not after I noticed her for the first time. She wasn't in the center of the frame. In fact, she blended into the background so well that if I hadn't been looking closely, I might have missed her entirely. But once I saw her, I couldn't unsee her. The camera would pan across the room, catching my parents laughing with guests, and there she'd be, standing just far enough away to watch, but not close enough to belong. I didn't know it yet, but that rainy afternoon in Seattle was the start of something I could never turn back from. It started as a flicker, a face my brain almost filed away as just another guest. But the more footage I watched, the more that face kept coming back. In the 1995 wedding video, she was easy to overlook at first. A deep blue dress, tasteful but not flashy. Her posture was perfect, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on my father. The camera caught her in the background during the vows, then again during the first dance. Always looking at him. Never smiling. When I moved on to 2001, I expected to see different people. Different city, different event. My father's 45th birthday in Chicago was held in a rented banquet hall. The lighting was warm, the walls lined with gold-trimmed mirrors. Guests milled around with wine glasses. And yet, there she was again. This time in a fitted burgundy suit, her brown hair in soft curls. Standing by the far wall, angled toward my father. And then came 2015. My college graduation. I remember that day vividly, or at least I thought I did. I remembered my father's hug, my mother's teary smile, the sound of my name over the loudspeaker. But what I didn't remember was the woman sitting in the very last row of the auditorium, wearing a sleek black suit, hands folded neatly in her lap, watching him. I paused the footage. My skin prickled. I rewound. Played it again. Same woman. Same ageless face. Same stillness, as though she wasn't just present, she was stationed there. I started pulling the images side by side. Blue dress. Burgundy suit. Black suit. 3 decades, 3 outfits, but the same eyes. The same faint, unreadable half-smile. And there was something else. In every single clip, my father's gaze would sweep the room, and for the briefest moment, it would land on her. And when it did, his expression would shift. Just slightly. Almost like recognition. That was the moment I realized this wasn't some coincidence. This was intentional. And I had to know why. Once I saw her, I couldn't unsee her. Every time I closed my eyes, that faint half-smile was waiting for me. And the more I stared at her in those frozen frames, the more my mind started rewinding through my own life, digging up moments I hadn't thought about in years. I remembered being 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table coloring while my mother stood at the sink, staring out the window. My father had just come back from a business trip, and she'd asked him something, I can't remember what, but I do remember the way her voice had changed. Quiet. Tight. Like she was holding her breath. And when he answered, she just nodded, put down the dish she was washing, and went upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the bathroom door click shut. And then, muffled sobs. At the time, I didn't understand. I told myself she must have been tired, or sick, or upset about something I didn't need to know. But now I wondered if that woman had been there, somewhere in the background of that trip, too. Other memories came flooding back. The times the phone rang late at night, and my mother would answer, listen for a second, then hang up without saying a word. The way she'd sometimes stop mid-sentence when my father walked into the room. The forced smiles at family dinners when he mentioned work events out of town. The strangest part? I could feel the tension even as a kid, but I never questioned it. It was like a piece of wallpaper that had always been peeling, you notice it, but you live with it, until one day you finally stop and ask why. Now, with those 3 videos burned into my mind, the peeling wallpaper was gone. The whole wall was crumbling. I kept replaying a single thought in my head. If she's been there all this time, how much has my mother known? It was late, and the house felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was holding its breath. I was in my parents' bedroom, sorting through the last of my mother's clothes, when my hand brushed against something tucked deep inside the back of her closet. A small, cream-colored envelope. No stamp. No address. It had been folded in half, as if someone had planned to throw it away, but changed their mind at the last second. The flap was already torn. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges and creased in the middle. The handwriting was my mother's, neat, elegant, but unsteady, as though her hand had been shaking when she wrote it. If you think I don't know. I saw you both. It was never just work. The words stopped me cold. No greeting. No sign-off. Just that, a half-confession, half-accusation, hanging in the air like smoke. I stared at the torn edge. The bottom half of the letter was missing, ripped clean away. I tried to picture my mother writing it. Was she crying? Was she angry? Did she ever send it, or was it always meant to stay hidden? I sank onto the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. I could hear her voice in my head, low and controlled, the way she'd speak when she was afraid of her own words. And then I remembered something. In the graduation footage from 2015, just after I walked off stage, the camera caught my mother in the crowd. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't even looking at my father. She was staring past him, toward the very last row, where the woman in black sat. The letter wasn't proof of who that woman was, but it was proof of something just as dangerous. My mother had known. I didn't sleep that night. The letter lay on my nightstand, the torn edge like an open wound I couldn't stop looking at. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to sit and wonder anymore. I was going to find her. I started by pulling the clearest still frames of the woman from each video. I printed them out, 3 separate pages, 1995, 2001, 2015. Even side by side, she barely looked older. Maybe a few more lines around the eyes, a touch more silver in her hair, but not enough for 20 years. I took the photos to a few of my parents' old friends, people who'd been at those events. Most of them frowned, shook their heads, and admitted they had no idea who she was. One woman, a former neighbor from our Chicago years, said quietly, "She was always around. I just assumed she was family, somehow." That made my stomach twist. Always around. When memory failed me, I turned to technology. I uploaded the stills to a facial recognition service. The results were frustrating. Most matches were dead ends, blurry security camera shots, outdated driver's licenses. But then one image popped up that stopped me cold. A corporate headshot from a financial company in Chicago, dated 2010. Name, Evelyn Hart. Title, Senior Analyst. I dug deeper. Public records showed she'd been employed there from 2007 to 2012, the same company where my father had been an executive vice president. And then I found it. An internal memo, leaked years ago in an unrelated lawsuit. Evelyn Hart was terminated for inappropriate relationship with a supervisor. The supervisor's name? Michael Walker. My father. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just about a woman who appeared in the background of family videos. This was about my father's past, and maybe, something much worse. At first, I thought Evelyn Hart was just a shadow from my father's past, a long-buried affair my mother had quietly endured. But the deeper I dug, the stranger it became. Buried in old newspaper archives and scattered LinkedIn profiles, I started to see a pattern. Evelyn had been linked, however briefly, to 3 other men from my father's professional circle. Not romantically, at least not publicly, but through shared projects, corporate travel, and the same company events. And each of those men was now gone. Mark Ellis, 52, head of compliance, last seen leaving a downtown Chicago bar in 2009. Case still open, though police suspected a mugging gone wrong. David Sloan, 47, senior auditor, found dead in his home in 2011. Official cause, carbon monoxide leak. Unofficially, too many inconsistencies to count. Patrick Monroe, 50, risk manager, vanished during a business trip to Denver in 2012. His rental car was found abandoned near a state park. No body. No explanation. The one thread tying them together? Michael Walker. My father. And Evelyn Hart. The more I read, the more a sick, heavy feeling settled in my chest. These weren't random tragedies. They were connected, and if Evelyn's presence at our family events was any clue, she wasn't just a bystander. One night, as I scrolled through an old message board for ex-employees of my father's company, I found a post from 2013. It was short. No name, no signature. Just, "Some people get paid to solve problems. Others get paid to make them disappear." I didn't know who had written it, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was about her. About Evelyn. And about what she, and my father, might have been hiding all these years. If I wanted answers, I had to stop hiding behind my computer screen. I had to look my father in the eye. I chose New Orleans because I knew he couldn't resist it. The French Quarter was his favorite place in the world. I told him I'd be in town for work and suggested we meet for dinner at Le Phoenix, a quiet, dimly lit restaurant tucked away from the main tourist streets. I didn't tell him what I was bringing. That evening, I wore a dress I'd found in an old photograph of Evelyn, deep burgundy silk, simple but striking. When I walked into the restaurant, I saw him already seated, scanning the menu. For a moment, he looked up at me, and froze. His eyes narrowed, just slightly. We made small talk over wine, but the tension was there, thick and heavy between us. Finally, I reached into my bag and slid a small leather-bound notebook across the table. He stared at it but didn't touch it. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low. "From someone who's tired of keeping your secrets," I said. Before he could reply, another figure appeared at the edge of the table. A woman in her 40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. "Jane," she said, "I'm Lydia Hart. Evelyn's sister." My father's face drained of color. Lydia placed a USB drive next to the notebook. "You might want to watch what's on this before you pretend you don't know her." I glanced at my father. He was gripping his wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Your father," Lydia continued, her voice calm but edged with steel, "has a long history of making problems disappear. Evelyn recorded more than you realize." I didn't say a word. Neither did he. The only sound was the slow, haunting notes of a jazz trumpet drifting in from the street outside. In that moment, I knew something had shifted. Whatever lay on that USB, it was about to change everything. The next morning, I sent copies of the files to 3 different journalists. By the end of the week, the footage had gone viral. News outlets dissected every frame. Commentators speculated on the scope of the corruption. 2 weeks later, my father was arrested. His company's stock collapsed overnight. Longtime executives resigned in a panic. But there was no sense of victory. Not for me. 3 days after the arrest, I came home to find an envelope slid under my door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words printed in stark black ink. "You're digging graves you can't fill." That night, I swore I heard footsteps outside my window. When I looked, the street was empty, but the feeling of being watched clung to me long after. The message was clear. Taking down my father was only the first step. Whatever he'd been part of, it was bigger. Much bigger. The notebook Lydia had given me wasn't just full of cryptic notes, it was a map. On the inside of the back cover, in faded blue ink, Evelyn had written a set of coordinates and a single word, cabin. I plugged the coordinates into Google Maps. The location was deep in the Montana wilderness, miles from the nearest town. No road names. Just a thin gray line that disappeared into the trees. 2 weeks later, I was there. The last stretch had to be done on foot. The air was sharp and cold, the silence broken only by the crunch of snow under my boots. The cabin itself was small, weathered, and almost swallowed by the forest. Inside, dust lay thick over everything, except for one metal lockbox tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It wasn't locked. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a black USB drive. No label, no markings. Back at a motel that night, I plugged it into my laptop. What I found made the first USB look tame. Detailed financial ledgers linking not just my father's company, but 6 major corporations, and names of politicians I'd seen on the news almost every day. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Private security contracts. Code phrases that only hinted at the crimes they covered. And then I saw the last folder. It was labeled with a single date, one that matched the day Patrick Monroe had disappeared in Denver. Inside were photos. Surveillance-style shots. Patrick at an airport. Patrick in a hotel lobby. And then, Patrick in the passenger seat of a black SUV. The driver's face was turned just enough toward the camera for me to recognize him. It wasn't my father. It was a man I didn't know, but something in my gut told me he knew me. The next morning, as I pulled onto the only road out of town, a black SUV appeared in my rearview mirror. No plates. No attempt to pass. Just, following. Miles later, I took a sudden turn onto a logging trail, my heart pounding. By the time I reached the main road again, the SUV was gone. But I knew what that meant. I wasn't just investigating anymore. I was in it. I didn't take the USB to the police. Not at first. I made 3 encrypted copies and sent them anonymously to investigative reporters I trusted, people who'd broken stories no one else would touch. Within a week, 2 of them called me, voices tight with urgency. "You need to get this to the FBI. Now." The Bureau moved fast. By the end of the month, a joint task force had been assembled. Warrants were issued. Offices raided. Bank accounts frozen. I watched it unfold on the news like a movie I hadn't agreed to be part of. High-profile arrests, CEOs, board members, political aides. One senator resigned mid-interview. The headlines called it one of the largest corporate political corruption takedowns in U.S. history. And in the middle of it all was my father. The footage showed him being led into federal court, wrists in handcuffs, head bowed, a man who'd once commanded boardrooms now unable to meet a single camera's lens. For years, I'd tried to reconcile the man who taught me to ride a bike with the man who disappeared 4 business trips that ended in other people's funerals. That day in court, I stopped trying. When he saw me in the gallery, he paused, just for a second. His mouth moved like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Then the marshals pulled him forward, and the moment was gone. The network collapsed faster than anyone predicted. But not everyone was caught. Some names from Evelyn's files never made the news. Some accounts remained untouched. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the black SUV in Montana hadn't just vanished. It was waiting. 5 years have passed since the trials ended. I no longer live in Seattle. I traded rain for the quiet stillness of Vermont, in a small house by a lake where the mornings smell like pine and the nights are so dark you can see every star. Life is quieter now. I have a family of my own, a husband who knows every part of this story, and a daughter who will grow up knowing that silence isn't always safety. Sometimes, when I'm sorting through old boxes, I'll find one of the printed still frames of Evelyn. I never throw them away. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she was a villain, a victim, or both. But I know she saw something in my father, and maybe in me, that made her keep coming back. The truth cost me my family as I knew it. It cost me the comfort of ignorance. But it gave me something I didn't know I was missing, the ability to speak out. If there's anything I've learned, it's this. Don't overlook the small details, sometimes they're the key to the whole truth. Silence can destroy more than words ever will. Truth always has a price, and justice needs someone willing to pay it. Every so often, a letter arrives in my mailbox. No return address. No signature. Just a single typed sentence, "Keep your eyes open." I don't know if it's a warning or a reminder. But I keep them all, tucked away in a drawer I rarely open. Because whatever the world thinks this story was about, it wasn't just about my father. It was about the voices that never get heard, and the people willing to speak for them. And for me, I was the voice my mother never had, and I'll keep speaking for those who can't.
If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever had to heal without an apology? And what gave you the strength to keep going anyway? Speech balloon, you never know. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Bell, like, subscribe, and share if you believe in turning pain into power. And remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning.